Reading 116 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, Volume 3, by Dr. Maurice Nicoll. Great Animal House, April 10th, 1948. The Food of Impressions. The work teaches us that the human machine takes in 3 foods. 1, ordinary food. 2, air. And 3, impressions. From these 3 foods, the machine produces the different energies for different centers to enable the machine to work. A man can therefore be ill from lack of any of these 3 foods. Without ordinary food, he can live for perhaps a few weeks. Without the food of air, he can perhaps live a few minutes. And the work says that without some food of impressions, a man cannot live a moment. Commentary. We will speak only of the food of impressions. Both when waking and sleeping, in the ordinary sense, a man is getting impressions. When asleep in bed, for example, many impressions come from his body, from being hot or cold, from pain or comfort, from the muscles subserving breathing, from the heart beating, and so on. If all impressions could be cut off, the man would die at once. Now let us take a man or woman in love who has not heard from the beloved. Suppose they begin to pine, waste away, and get ill. Let us suppose they are taken to hospital. The doctors prescribe more nourishing food and drink, or they recommend a change of air, and so on. Yet the poor patients remain certainly ill, weak, wretched. Port wine every hour is no good. Then suddenly a telegram arrives. The beloved is still alive and is coming tomorrow. Do you not think that suddenly this woman, this man, becomes quite different? Of course. And what is the reason? What is this strange food that has made the change so rapidly? This strange food is the food of impressions. How is this food administered? By the telegram, by the wonderful news. Now, long ago, when I and a few others were fighting for the recognition of the psychological factor in medicine, I sometimes used an illustration of the above kind, but it was met very heavily by the doctors of those days. I have little doubt that they would have liked to have the bit of paper on which the marvelous words were written, and weigh it, and measure it, and analyze its chemical components, so as to find a physical cause for the transformation in the patient. I am sure that some of them, by sending similar telegrams to patients not in love and getting no results, would say that it was obvious that telegrams were of no medical value. Well, that was the state of darkness in those first 2 decades of this century, when the battle for the psychological factor in illness was being waged. And then came shell shock. And actually, eminent medical men searched in the blood for some unusual platelet or some foreign body to account for a man breaking down who had been in the trenches for months and months under heavy shelling, sniping, and mortar bombs. Yes, this psychological factor was not recognized distinctly. Now, if your food of impressions is nothing but daily horrors, then it will be very bad food and will make you ill, just as bad air or bad food without vitamins will make you ill, give you scurvy, and so on. I often think that the whole range of physical illnesses due to lack of vitamins, such as scurvy, etc., can be re-represented on the mental plane by a correspondence. A narrow, prejudiced, mean person, a jealous person, a negative person, for example, will take in negative impressions and so be ill on that level, whereas a person more generous and broad-minded will not. We pay for every wrong attitude, for everything we do not forgive, for everything we lie to ourselves about, for every negative state. We will speak now about noticing, observing, the effect of impressions, about what the work term food of impressions means practically. Take yourself. You hear that the horse you have backed has won. That is nice. Or you hear it has lost. That is not so good. Now, the news that the horse has won or lost is one example of food of impressions. Yet, people occasionally say to me that they do not understand what food of impressions means. They understand ordinary food and drink, They are rather dubious when one speaks of air being a food. How can it be, doctor? Why, you cannot even see it, as someone once said to me. But they regard impressions being a food as sheer nonsense. Now, suppose you are asked to dine with someone and feel hungry. The first course is, say, a real mixed grill, properly cooked. But the fashionable cellar you are dining in is warmed by an anthracite stove that leaks, so you get a headache. That is, the food of air is bad. Well, you struggle along. Then the person you are dining with says your dress does not suit you and you look awful in it. Now, in such a case, the actual food, 768, is excellent. The food of air, 192, is tainted with carbon monoxide and so poisonous. And finally, the food of impressions, namely, you look awful, is not exactly very good. I fear you will not enjoy that evening. I think a badly cooked meal, in good air and surrounded by charming companions, would be infinitely preferable. Yes, but we do not notice all this. We are blind to it. There is a proverb, better a dinner of herbs where love is than a stall-fed ox, and hatred therewith. What is the open secret? Better to eat a scanty meal with good food of impressions than a feast with negative emotions. Now, in taking in impressions, it is necessary later on in the work to realize that all impressions are, in a sense, internal, even when we see another person outside us. Let us suppose a man sees his beloved, with her arms full of roses, advancing towards him across the sunlit lawn. He gains very strong impressions. His heart expands or contracts, or whatever it does. Consider for a moment the sight of his beloved is an impression entering by rays of light into his eye as an image. This image, as in a camera, falls upside down on his sensitive camera plate or retina. So his beloved is upside down. Then her upside-down image is received by about 7 million light-sensitive nerve points, which combine and send up through 1 million separate nerves this darling image to the brain. On the way, this beloved image, first upside down, then split in 1 million separate nerve impulses, is divided in such a way that one bit of the left brain at the back of the head receives 1/2 of her, and the right brain the other half, speaking very roughly, and each stimulates further millions of cells. When all the complex apparatus which relates us to the beloved and the roses is grasped a little, we realize that the external world of objects seen is the result of internal nerve cell machinery. Yet it seems so close, so embraceable, but it is really very distant, and therefore it is impossible to get into that immediate contact with it, which we all desire and expect. But if you begin to understand your beloved, and she you, through learning a common language such as the work, you are far closer. We are far closer to one another psychologically than physically. Really, is it not laughable that the nice man, in the act of proposing, is proposing to the nice woman upside down, and vice versa? A marvelous clever affair is all one can say, but it makes one reflect on the ancient idea that in some way this outer world is a sort of illusion. At this present time, people are not necessarily only affected adversely by limited quantities of ordinary food, but also by lack of the right food of impressions. Dullness, drabness, monotony mean lack of impressions. You must understand, then, that a person may be sick because of lack of that most important food of all, the food of impressions. Consider, then, the difference between a drab world of uniformity and a colorful world of differences. Which do you think will give you more food of impressions? Which world will be psychologically the right one? It will certainly not be the right one if everything is reduced to a common level, so that no differences exist. A man does not get rich impressions from sameness, but from differences. This brings us to the question of the reception of impressions. How do we receive impressions from outside, or rather, on what do these impressions fall? They fall on associations. As a consequence, life tends to have the same effect day after day. The impressions, of course, are never just the same. It is our reception of them that is the same. Gurdjieff once said, "Try to see things without associations." Now, if we could see things without associations, we would be transported into a world of marvels. Impressions would fall on essence. Gurdjieff was once asked, "What happens when impressions fall on essence?" He replied, "Everything becomes more vivid." Now, as we are, impressions fall on a machinery of associations which distributes the impressions to different centers, mechanically. That is, impressions produce a mechanical habitual effect and do not gain the vividness they should. So we have to change our associations, and this begins by realizing, briefly speaking, everything the work teaches us to realize by means of self-observation and non-identifying. For example, the dawning realization that one is mechanical weakens associations based on the view that one is fully conscious. Seeing things from the work point of view alters mechanical associations. This in turn increases the reception of the food of impressions. If we continue to think in the old way, we will not be able to loosen mechanical associations. You cannot reach a new feeling of yourself if you persist in your old thinking. So the Gospels teach that metanoia, that is, change of mind or new thinking, is the starting point for change of oneself. Associations are part of us, but we do not notice them. They act before we can see them acting. But with experience in self-observation, we can notice both the incoming impression and the association it is about to set going, and eventually we can prevent it from doing so. This is a very good stage to reach in the work, of inestimable value. Amongst other things, it enables one to see practically, and not to think theoretically, that the outer world only reaches us through, as it were, a mass of distorting lenses, and that we do not really see one another, but only our ideas of people, or our associations with them with which we are identified. That is why when people do not behave as we expect, we are upset. They do not correspond with the associations we have of them and ourselves. That is one reason why people put each other in prison. It is necessary to let go, to loosen these associations.